Hello and welcome to a new series. I just turned on a light here. I think this is better. This makes me look more human, right? This video is an intro of sorts to the series. I wanted to lay the grounds for what I'm going to talk about later because I will go kind of deep into mythology, into sometimes psychology, into literary themes, and I don't want the point of this series to get lost. This video is about what mythology is and its role today, in my opinion. The book that I'm basing most of my opinions on is The Power of Myth. If you don't know that book, it's kind of a peculiar one because it wasn't born as a book. Originally, it was a PBS interview series. It was like a documentary on Joseph Campbell. It was called Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth. So let me tell you who Joseph Campbell is. He was an American comparative mythologist whose guiding idea, and I quote, was to find the commonality of themes in world myths, pointing to a constant requirement in the human psyche for a centering in terms of deep principles. So in easier terms, one of his goals was to group different myths from around the world under archetypical umbrellas. So what's an archetype? Well, here we get into one of the main aspects of this series, which is the correlation between stories and myths and psychology. Because an archetype isn't just one thing. We can find archetypes both in psychology and literature, and as much as the two intersect, they're not exactly the same thing. An archetype, according to Wikipedia, can be any of the following. A statement, pattern of behavior, prototype, first form, or a main model.
The other statements, patterns of behavior and objects, copy, emulate, or merge into. And formal synonyms frequently used for this definition include standard example, basic example, and the longer form, archetypal example.
And now is psychology time. For Carl Jung, an archetype was a collectively inherited unconscious idea, a pattern of thought, image, etc., that is universally present in individual psyches. In the arts, however, it is a constantly recurring symbol or motive. So to me, a way to summarize this is an archetype is like a model, right? Which can be a pattern or it can comprise a number of patterns coming from different specific examples that might come from different places, times, cultures, but ultimately really boil down to the same thing. This makes me think about that quote from the Sea Song by BTS, which is everything's the same thing with a different name. Where you find an archetype, you find a metaphor. Myths are pretty much made of archetypes, which means that they are made of metaphors. Now, there is this notion that myths were to earlier civilizations what history and science are to us now. Well, that's not exactly true, because myths are born with a different purpose. They are meant to create a behavioral map through which one can interpret the world. They are meant to guide people through life and show them what to do in certain challenging situations. So the best way to show that is basically through stories, and we see that constantly, right? With movies right now, with books, think of Marvel movies or the Harry Potter series. How many people end up identifying with certain archetypes within those stories and acting them out in real life in their own way? The purpose of mythology is just that. Now, people believing really in the myths or not isn't really what we're talking about here, but us as a society, we have kind of moved away from this mentality. I did mention some stories that still carry that kind of value for us, but it's not nearly as widespread as it used to be. We have fewer myths, or I should say mythologized stories, and people can be hesitant in interacting with them as if they carried real meaning. Of course, except fans. Those are usually the only ones that really end up getting the point of those kind of stories. Everybody else consumes them as forms of entertainment, and that's it. What Campbell advises to get into mythology is not to read the myths from your own culture, but rather myths from different cultures, because we tend to try to look at our myths as truth or find the truth in them, like historical truth. How did this actually happen to sort of prove them? Whether because we look at other people's myths as something that is obviously not true, we end up actually getting the point of the story. So we've established that mythology is really just a way of going inwards into our own psyche. This is also, coincidentally, the point of tarot cards. Tarot cards are also made of archetypes and metaphors and symbols. I'm gonna be quick about this because I did talk about it in my last video, but basically a huge point of tarot is to use the symbols on the cards to interpret situations, states of mind, etc. So it's not surprising that a lot of the symbols that we find in tarot, we also find in plenty of stories from different places around the world. It's always dogs! Not even children are this annoying. The reason why I love these topics so much can be explained in another one of Campbell's quotes, coming from his view that it won't be technology that's going to save us, but it will be our own intuition and true being. The interviewer here asked if that isn't an affront to reason, and his answer was this. That's not what the hero's journey is about. It's not to deny reason. To the contrary, by overcoming the dark passions, the hero symbolizes our ability to control the irrational savage within us. This makes me think of, how certain people claim to be very rational people, but to do that, they try to suppress their emotions and feelings and instincts. And that never works out because it's actually incredibly irrational to try to erase a part of your being, Ignoring it won't make it go away. It will just let it operate in the dark where you can't control it. So this being the foundational ideas for my new series, I will see you again soon if you decide to come back. Otherwise, I don't care. Have a good rest of your week anyways. Ciao, ciao! We did it. At least these videos help me stay hydrated because I'm just drinking constantly. To extinguish the fire of anger that burns inside of me. Oh! It's silent again. Let's go. I can do this all day. I can do this all day. Come at me, noises. Come at me.